Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. This week I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Morton, who is the founder and head coach at the Practical Leadership Academy. Paul, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here, Paul. What a fantastic name we both have.
Certainly, I use it every day.
Yeah.
Before we get kicked off on some of the stuff, particularly around the Practical Leadership Academy and the great stuff that you do, can you give us a bit of background to yourself? Who are you? What's brought you to where you are today?
Sure. Well, my mother and father met back in... No, sorry, that's a bit too far, isn't it? So I'll rewind, No, I've been trying to make money ever since I was about 13. So I've been working forever.
Right.
But for about the last 25 years, I've been working for learning companies, digital learning, and then it's sort of morphed into HR tech. And I've had every role you can imagine, from coder to salesperson to marketeer, products, technical, and everything. And I ended up in revenue leadership for the last significant amount of time. I did that for quite a while, and then was a COVID victim. And left my last company, fabulous bunch of people called Cross Knowledge. Left them about 2-3 years ago, and I've set up my own since then. So I've been coaching and mentoring people since then, coaching inside revenue leadership, execs in high growth, scale up startups, that sort of thing. And been finding out that there is significant needs and impact able to be made when you think and focus on people at the very, very pointy end of organizations. And for me, these are the managers, the team leads, right, who are responsible for individual contributors.
Right.
Typically are neglected.
Yeah. Couple of interesting points I just want to pick out of that initial experience area. You mentioned revenue leadership or revenue management. What, for those of us who aren't as au fait in that space, what has that been? What does that center around? What's your experience in revenue leadership?
Well, I mean, when I talk about what it is I do in that space right now, I talk about making more money faster. Right. That's what the idea is. So, and that encompasses revenue, really encompasses the idea of, in an organization, it's everything that comes from finding people to sell to,
right,
helping to sell to them, having sold to them, then making sure that they get what they've bought and that they keep wanting to buy more.
Right.
And this is typically in SaaS businesses, so that's software as a service businesses, or product, or whatever it is as a service.
Yep.
Where there is an element of recurrency. And recurring revenue is a function of recurring impact. So you have to keep delivering what it is you say you're delivering, and more of that, please.
Yep.
In order for people to say, yes, please, I'll have this again this month, this quarter, this next year coming. So revenue for me encompasses going out there and working out, who am I going to sell to? What is this market I've got? How am I going to approach it? What's my ideal customer in there? What do they do that I can fix or make better or make easier for them? And then trying to break all that down into a buying journey. How do I bring people on a journey where they want to buy something from me? Right. It's not selling to them, it's helping them to buy, because most people recognize they have a problem. They are experts in their problems, but they don't know how to fix them. So if you can find somebody who's got a problem and is trying to fix it themselves with some sticky tape, chewing gum, and a couple of sharp pencils, and then you come to them with some clever way of fixing it that's going to cost them tuppence halfpenny versus the 50 quid that they're spending at the moment, they're going to say, hang on a minute, instead of £10, I can spend £1 and have solution X. Where do I sign?
Right.
And it's helping them go through that journey and understanding that there is a problem they have, that there are impacts for it, that it's costing them a certain amount of money, that you can have a solution for it for 1/10 of that money, and that problem is easily solvable with whatever the platform tech thing is.
Nice. And the other bit I just wanted to pick up on was you were saying you've been working and earning since you were 13. What was it that drove you in those early stages? What was the drive
Abject
within you?
poverty. I was piss poor. I wanted money in my pocket. I mean, I started off washing dishes in my local restaurant.
Right.
I was door-to-door sales of chocolate bars. I was a waiter in a god-awful hotel in the little town where I came from. I did a lot of retail stuff, a lot of bar work, a lot of stuff. I had a great time at university working in lots of theatres. Sounds very glamorous, darling, working in theatre. I was in theatre. I was selling ice creams.
Right.
I was selling ice creams and programs, and eventually got promoted to be a key holder. So I would open the door for all the actors and actresses to come through and practice in this. So I got to see loads and loads of fabulous shows in Edinburgh, where I went to university.
Right.
There was the Edinburgh Festival, of course. So I got to see all this stuff fabulously free. Well, everything up to the last, 3 or 4 minutes before the interval, at which point you leg it downstairs to the freezer to bring up the tub of ice creams.
Right.
So I got to see Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables 150 times. So it was great fun.
Amazing. I was just talking to another guest who we don't know which order these podcasts are going to come out on, but it will be another episode with Hugo Pickford Wardle, who is doing some great work with teenagers and helping teenagers in that sort of work experience, the early teens area, aiming to get them earning 16K by 16. And, that whole driver of you can help. Kids are always motivated by something. They've got ideas, they've got things out there, but nothing motivates like, I'm going to pay you for it. Particularly in those teenage years, aren't they? It's a real motivator.
Well, there's so much more, though, that comes from work. And I think it's one of these great societal things that we've got so many people now in the UK specifically. We've got 5 point something ridiculous million people who could be working but are not. But there's so much that comes from doing a good day's work. Yeah. There's so much that comes for the individual themselves. There's so much benefit, warmth of spirit, of endeavor, of hope, of capability, there's so many parts of our psyche that are rewarded by doing something and doing it well.
Yeah. Being part of something, adding value, those sorts of great things.
Being part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
But also just doing a good day's work.
Yeah.
Preferably for a good day's pay.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so that brings us on now to what you're doing with the Practical Leadership Academy. Can you tell us a bit more about that in terms of who you help and how you help them?
Well, the idea is to help new managers, typically new managers in a hybrid environment. So as we find, there's many people stepping into management roles and they don't have a Scooby, quite frankly. What happens is you get all these new managers, they're typically young, and the new managers are the managers of the new employees, typically young. So the new employees coming into an organization, large or small, their first experience of management is rubbish because the people who are managing are rubbish. And it's not who they are that is rubbish, it's just what they do. They just don't know how to do it yet. They haven't learned yet. And the support they get is pants. It really is very, very poor. So what I came to, and I'll tell you how I got there in a minute, what I came to was the idea that supporting these people is in some way my attempt to change the planet, change the world. I've got 2 young kids, and my daughter was talking to me. She's 11 going on 16. She's 11 and she was talking about her going out to work and all this. And she can go out to work. I think in this country is still it's 13 when she can go out and get a job. Right. And by God, she will. Not only because I'm going to kick her out the door and make sure she does it, but she's driven to do that. And I was thinking, oh God, help her if she met me in my first job. It's kind of like a dad thing. Right. The dad thing is, I really don't want you to ever go out and meet boys because you might meet me like I was at that age. And I was a turd, totally. But I was also, when you think about it professionally, I was a dreadful, dreadful manager. I left this trail of destruction behind me And I still, every time I think about it, I apologize profusely to anybody that had the misfortune to encounter me when I was learning how to manage people. So the crap that I put people through. I mean, there's one thing that woke me up the other night. Actually, I remember berating somebody in the middle of the open area about some work they hadn't done, thinking, oh, I could have just turned the corner and gone somewhere private. You. So I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was Francesco, actually. But if you're listening, Francesco, I'm so sorry, buddy. I really am. It's like the 12-step process. You've got to go through and find everybody you've maimed and apologize to them. So back on track.
Yeah.
So my wee girl going out there, and I'm thinking, how can I help make sure that she doesn't have to go through this god-awful experience that I went through, not only being managed by somebody bad, but being a bad manager.
Right.
And it came about by I was asked by one of my clients to deliver a leadership management training course, and I did. I pulled out, course number 1. I said, "Is this going to cover all the topics?" And the person I was talking to said, "Yes, that's absolutely fine. Sounds perfect." It was it was like a 4-day, 3 hours a day thing. Went down well. Everybody seemed to like it, but some of the feedback I got back was very pointy.
Right.
And I don't do that, thank you very much. I want AAA, wonderful, top-notch, fabulous feedback. And I went into it and I dug into it, and I found out that it was very young people who were giving the feedback saying, no good, not practical, not usable, too much fluff and nonsense. And because I think people desire really something that's eminently practical and eminently workable and eminently useful in the moment. And that's not what I was doing. I mean, I had a section on Fordism and Taylorism in there, for goodness sake, management control and all that sort of stuff for the factory-based worker, rather than the cognitive creatives that we are today. So I took it away, threw out 80% of the content, and came up with the playbook that I put out to market. So I've run this now a couple of times as a coaching thing. So what we do is we do 25 minutes with about 10-15 minutes worth of content and about 10-15 minutes worth of coaching in the moment, twice a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays is how I've been doing it. 9:30 in the morning, bright and early. 25 minutes, one topic at a time. So it's how to have a one-to-one, how to listen, how to give feedback, how to have difficult conversations, how to set goals, how to hire, how to fire, all that sort of stuff. The stuff that I've drilled it down to 18 things that you desperately need to know how to do to be a competent, decent manager. And in fact, if you can actually think about how you do these and do them well, that in itself is the definition for me of excellence.
Right.
So that's what I did. Boiled this stuff down, put it as a course together, and I deliver that now. I normally run about once a month to a group of about 10 people at a time, and it's fabulous. It's great fun to do, because in there I also chuck in like an open clinic every couple of weeks, so people can bring their challenges and their troubles. And we have a group session, group confab, on trying to fix that. Then somebody said, you should record it. I went, I suppose I could. So I did. So I've recorded it, I put it online, and it's available as like a digital course as well.
Right.
And it seems to be quite popular. Sold a few hundred of them, thank you very much indeed. So it's quite nice.
Nice.
So yeah, that's what I've done.
Oh, fantastic. And I mean, just echoing a few of the points there that I've experienced. Firstly, the early manager in me was, I've got some apologies to make from my past as well. And just it's very rarely, if ever, done with any bad intent. It's always like people going in gung-ho and trying their best with what they know at the time is my take on things. And it's not that people are trying to be a bad manager. They're trying to get results, and they think that's often the sort of the main driver to being a good manager, is to drive the results that are in front of them, and that leads to maybe not thinking about the humans in front of them too much. So that's my experience, drawing on for being very self-reflective and looking on my early days as a manager. It was I could learn a lot from that space. Is that the sort of thing that you see? Do you echo that in some of the people you've worked with?
I think there's a lot of bad advice out there for a start.
Right.
And I think people tend to miss a few of the major points, not least of which is that you've all of a sudden given this job title of manager, which means you're the boss, you're in charge, you're in control, you have power, right? So your ego comes straight into play. And as an early younger manager, my ego was all over the place. You didn't recognize that it's actually a tool, but it can also be a weapon. So it can be a tool to drive you to success, to get you up on stage, to perform, to do stuff like that. But it can also pull you down. And when you start making decisions based on your ego, or where your ego is telling you what to do, they are quite invariably bad decisions, harmful in some cases. And then equally, when you're considering what to do, some of the advice like first things first. No. Last things first. Last things first. What are you trying to achieve? Why are you here? What is your job? My job's to be the manager. Of whom? To what end? Why? What are you trying to do with this management hat that you are now wearing? And not considering what the role of you, what the role of your team is in the context of your company, and from the revenue side of it as well, especially in the context of the person who pays the bills, which is ultimately the buyer. What is it you're supposed to be doing? That's the thing that comes first. Then you work backwards from there and fit everything else into the blanks.
Oh, brilliant. I love that sort of term I heard a while back, right to left thinking. You know, it's start with the end in mind, move your way backwards on there. I want to pick up on a point you were making earlier as well about, if I'm hearing it correctly, you're saying that excellence is almost the basics. It's about doing...
It's absolutely the basics.
Yeah.
Excellence is absolutely the basics, and it's been fairly well proven. There's a concept called deliberate practice, which is how anybody learns anything. One piece at a time, but it's one piece of the right thing at a time. You've probably heard of the 10,000 or 20, whatever it is, 10,000 hours of practice.
Yeah.
It's rubbish. Absolute rubbish. It's 10,000 hours of the right practice.
Right.
Starting with the small stuff. Right. Now, something like 80% of results comes from the first things that you do, the simple things that you do. When you get good at something, then you start looking at the hairy ends of the scale of the difficult stuff. If you think, there's the wonderful piece from the British cycling when they went to the Olympics, and they started wiping down the spokes of the bicycles to get the dust off. They made sure, way before hand sanitizers were a thing and a common cocktail that we all started to imbibe, they were using them. And they were telling people, if you have the slightest change in temperature, stay home, do not bring your illness to the team. So they were wiping the dust off the spokes of the bicycles to save weight and to stop clogging up the gears, because that was the level of performance improvement you could achieve. It's the minutiae. However, you put me in one of those bikes, I'd fall on my backside.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you've got a background in McLaren there. There's not a chance in hell I could drive one of those cars. No way. You have to be so far down the line to have any impact improvement from those sorts of levels of performance improvement techniques and things that we spend so much of our time on, because they're shiny, because they've got fabulous names, that we're distracted. And we are distracted from simply putting one foot in front of the other and doing that very, very well. To my point, it's having a good one-to-one is one of the most powerful things you can do to drive performance in your team.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Setting clear objectives that somebody reiterates back to you and owns and then delivers against is how you drive performance. It's how you drive people forward. It's not by thinking about the moonshot, crazy end of the scale stuff that once you've been through Crottonville for General Electric for 25 years and you have a phenomenal whatever it is, you can tack on these crazy hacks to what you're doing. Start with the basics. The basics can be magical. They are magical, and the basics well executed is the very definition of excellence.
Fantastic. I was talking to the potential client the other day about incremental gains and the whole value of that, and just accidentally stumbled upon an equation around it, or some maths that sat behind it. And I thought, I'm such can be a maths geek at times. And it was like, if you start off with 1 as your standard performance, and you have one intervention per year that ups that performance by 20% or 50%, say, let's say 50%, huge, massive intervention that ups your performance by 50%, you're going to end up with 1.5 at the end of the year. That's your performance. If you start with 1 and do 1.01 the following day, and then you do 1% on that, and you do those compounding gains, so it's 1.01 to the power 365, you end up with 37.8, I think it is. It's streets ahead. It's doing those basic things, but doing them slightly better day on day, but making sure that you not only do them slightly better, but you put those chocks in place to stop you from rolling back as well. You make sure you've got the basics in place.
Yeah, we regress so easily. But it is these fundamentals. And I was asked, what sort of impact? When can I expect some impact from this thing that you offer? I was thinking about 10 minutes. Oh, that's not right. It's totally 10 minutes, right? Yeah. Giving somebody feedback that they act on rather than just go, yeah, whatever. Feedback that they act on, 10-minute impact, guaranteed.
Right.
I mean, even looking at one of the first things I talk about in the course is your time, because new managers, especially, in fact, absolutely every manager, is time.
Yeah.
And my estimate is that, and I haven't been proven wrong yet, is that if I help you look at your calendar and think about what you're doing differently, just ever so slightly differently, take you 10 minutes, I can save 25% of your time in about 10 minutes flat.
Right.
You want to go further than that? We can probably make it about half of your time. Half of your time is whittled away against the wall, and we can probably find it with a few simple techniques. And then you look at prioritization, and then you look at actually the things like time boxing and how you manage your calendar.
Yeah. Who wouldn't want a day to 2 days to 2.5 days a week free in their diary? What an amazing piece of value.
Wait, easy one, right? If you want to have a week extra, there's 52 weeks in the year.
Yeah.
Okay. We each get here in the Europe side of the West, 6 weeks of holiday. Why don't you go to your boss and say, boss, if I can find an extra week in my calendar, can I have it as holiday? Now, he or she will say, not a chance in hell. But you go into your calendar, find the meeting you hate that everyone else hates, and cancel it. 1 hour a week, job done, multiply it by 52. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
We're done now, Paul. That was fun.
I've experienced that myself in the past. Now, cancelling meetings and cancelling reports as well. If you're responsible for reports, and just stop doing it, see what happens.
See if anybody notices. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the amount of time and effort that can support. Brilliant stuff. I want to ask you about your performance now. So, who do you go to? How do you improve your own performance? Keep sort of sharpening the saw for yourself. Where do you go to up your own performance?
Well, there's a great guy called John at my gym, and he very occasionally wanders over and corrects my grip and moves my feet around and makes me hurt even more than I do. And he corrects my performance, so that's the physical.
Right.
It goes very well there, and that's incremental. That's very small things, but it's getting the basics right. It's getting form right. It translates. It all translates into every field you like.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful woman that I don't speak to enough called Teresa, who has offered me fantastic advice over many, many years. I have friends who lean in and say, that's an interesting idea. Have you thought about it?
Right.
And there are people that I coach who offer me advice in return. I mean, there's a lovely thing about people who are mentors or coaches. Number one, it's a great cure for imposter syndrome.
Right.
If you ever feel uncertain, go be a mentor to someone else. You only need to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the game, and you're an expert. Well, you're an expert in their eyes. 1 or 2 steps ahead of the game, of their game, and you're an expert in their eyes. Be that mentor. Have somebody turn to you and say, how do I? And your response is, what are your options? You don't give them the answer. What do you think? And you help them find it themselves. That's more coaching than mentoring, really. Um, but the people that I work with and mentor, I get so much more back than I feel that I give.
Right.
I get great response, great people say, "Oh, thank you so much, I was promoted." I was like, fan-bloody-tastic, another one.
Yeah.
And there was a report, I was a CBR or Harvard or one of those things, and it was like, people who get a coach or have a coach or a mentor are 3 times more likely to be promoted and all that. And at the same breath, it was people who are a coach or a mentor are 7 times more likely to be successful. 7, wow. I can't remember how they measured it, but I do remember that. And it's so true. It's just so true. I get so much more out of the people that I actually work for, in essence, than I feel that I give.
Yeah. So that brings us on to something that we've got in common, which is you've run a podcast. So I was lucky enough to be a guest on that podcast recently. And I'd just like to ask you, firstly, what that podcast is all about, but also what value do you get from it? How does it help you perform?
And you're a phenomenal guest as well, Paul.
Much appreciated.
I had all these conversations with people. I'm a bit of a bletherer. I love to talk to different people and try and learn from them. And it occurred that I should try and capture some of that wisdom and knowledge and share what it is that I learn more widely. And it's the Practical Leadership Podcast, available wherever you find your pods. Practical Leadership Podcast. And the goal for me is to capture the wisdom of, I'm aiming for 100 people.
Right.
When I get to 100 people, then I'll sit back and reflect. I'm at 30 so far.
Nice.
And capture the knowledge and wisdom of 100 people so that you can learn from their experience and try not to replicate their mistakes, and capture some good how-tos. Right. How-tos, always the title of what I put together. How to lead from the heart, says Neil Odin, of the Chief Fire Officer of New Hampshire. Phenomenal guy.
Yeah.
They're all really interesting people. And I get from it the opportunity to talk to some interesting people that I perhaps might not have otherwise done. But typically I do try and lean out to my network and connect with different folk all the time anyway. But the fact I can now capture it means I can go back and listen to them again. If I fast forward through the bits where I'm talking, they're the boring bits, and get to the good stuff, the meat of the conversations is normally phenomenal. It's such insights that people can bring out.
I've found the whole experience to be very cathartic, but also hugely inspiring and hugely inspirational from a perspective of, here are the sorts of things I could do potentially differently, different avenues of bringing my own skill set somewhere else, but also just learning new things and new approaches from people that wouldn't necessarily have come to me naturally. So expanding the network, talking to people, listening. It doesn't have to be through a podcast piece, and certainly from an early manager perspective as well, trying to link that back. It's about talking to other managers, isn't it? And it's about talking to people. My experience in those early stages was people didn't talk about how to be a manager with other managers. So who's having that conversation? I've got this complicated conversation I need to have. How should I go about it? It's it's always a case of, I've just had a really bad conversation with somebody because it was a really complex situation that I was ill prepared for.
Yeah, and I trod on it. I made an absolute arse of it. Yeah. It was 12 years before I met my first real manager who really inspired me to the fact that management leadership is a practice that you should, could, and must develop. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful man called Jacques Levy. And I'm honestly a bit embarrassed that I haven't invited him on, but I'm kind of reluctant to do it, I really do. I don't.
Save it for episode 100.
Well, do you know what? Maybe I will. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll do that. I'll save it for episode 100. This is, I know, because, and I'm not honestly in touch with him as much as I wish I was. And it's not for lack of desire from, I'm sure, either of our parts, because we always got on really, really well. I don't know, it's just I'm almost kind of embarrassed.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just am. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh,
Jack, if you're listening, sorry, buddy.
So a couple of different questions now to close things out a little bit. One is, if you could take your skill set and your experience and help anyone, any individual, team, organization to perform, who would you like that to be?
I don't know if there is a specific name. It's not like, oh, I'll go and help the Twitter, content moderation team or something daft like that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got somebody there in mind. What I do really helps. So I hope, right, it's intended to help so many varied groups. I mean, I work with people who are both in HR tech, who are in the healthcare business,
Right.
charities, all sorts of different organizations, all sorts of different people and different people stages. The things that they have in common is that they have a desire, hence talking to me, a desire to improve, to do better for the benefit of the people that they support,
Right.
that they have in their charge. And it is almost a parental thing, frankly. And it's not really surprising that my real leadership journey, I think, moved from being management to leadership, moved from being practical to being more led from the heart when I became a dad.
Right.
And you realize very quickly the parallels. It's such a responsibility, but it's also such a privilege. Such a privilege to have the opportunity to help other people perform. It's from holding the hands of your little boy or little girl as they're taking their first steps, and knowing that they have to fall over. You cannot pick them up.
Yeah.
You can't stop them falling over. It's just innate. Nobody says, and when your child takes their first steps and lands on their arse, you must. No, it's just, you just know it to be so, that they must fall over.
Yeah.
To the point where I was teaching my daughter to ride a bike and said to her, right, when we're doing this, you will fall off and it will hurt. And when it does, you must get back on your bicycle and it will take you at least 10 times to fall. And she did. And she fell off 4 times or whatever it was, quite, skinned her knees. Ride a bike, lo and behold. But,
yeah.
That's the sort of thing that I would try to do.
Brilliant. And on the flip side of that, if you could sit down, have a coffee, a beer, a glass of wine, whatever your thing is, with somebody, have a chat, in order to inspire you and ultimately up your performance, who would you want that to be?
Oh, it would have to be a fantasy dinner party. Totally. I love to cook and I love to drink good wine.
Nice.
It's too short for bad wine. So I would have Isambard Kingdom Brunel. I would have Donald Trump, Bonnie Prince Charlie, and possibly Charles Dickens. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, the Bristolian who built the bridges and the trains and all this, a phenomenal engineer. I would like to ask him. There's so much you'd like to ask him. Where did they get the ideas from?
Yeah.
How did he not? Because he wasn't necessarily the big creator. He was the doer. He was the guy that got stuff done. What was it like to work in that Victorian environment where you could make phenomenal changes? The SS Great Britain, the Clifton Suspension Bridge, all these amazing things. Donald Trump, possibly one of the most persuasive and influential people on the face of the earth right now. If you cannot deny that the man has reach and influence. And I just want to have a little bit of insight into how he does what he does. I mean, I've been studying influence and persuasion and even hypnotism for the last 15 odd years.
Right.
You can see there's a lot of that in there. And you look at his history, and he was influenced by people like Norman Vincent Peale and those preachers, early preachers.
Right.
Him and his dad, Fred Trump. They both went to the same church. Bonnie Prince Charlie, 1745, the Jacobite Rebellion. I really want to ask, what is it with you and Flora MacDonald? What was going on there? Did you really take the speed Bonnie boat over the bridge to Skye, over the river to over the sea to Skye, and find out from him what made him come back? What made him dig in and come back from exile to do that? And then Dickens, mostly because I absolutely love. He's my favorite writer.
Right.
For no other reason than he has such clarity and precision in his writing and such emotive, his use of language, of course, but his use of names. He comes up with these amazing names. Scrooge sounds marvelous.
Just to round things off, in terms of how people can find out more, both about the Practical Leadership Academy, maybe get in touch with you, and your podcast as well. How do people find out more about those things?
Well, it's the Practical Leadership Podcast. It's on Podbean, Apple, Spotify, you name it, you go find it.
Yeah.
And I'm on LinkedIn naturally, so Paul W. Morton, you can find me on LinkedIn, and practical-leadership.academy, Practical Leadership Academy. You can find me there as well. More than happy to talk to anybody about anything.
Brilliant. And I'll make sure those links are in the show notes so everybody has those available to them. Well, a fantastic and really fascinating conversation there, Paul. Really appreciate your time. And best of luck with the Leadership Academy. I'm about halfway through the online course at the moment. I'm going to continue that over the next week or so, and I'll keep you posted with my progress. And thanks for being on the show today.
An absolute pleasure, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.